The moment he leaned across the table, eyes darting, and whispered, "Act normal," my world shifted. It was supposed to be just another ordinary dinner, the kind that breaks up the monotony of the week, the kind of night where laughter flows as easily as the wine, where the clinking of cutlery against china feels like background music to friendship and comfort. We were out with another couple, friends we'd known for years, at a restaurant we had been to countless times. The lighting was soft, golden, the kind that flatters everything it touches. Our table was tucked into a corner, candles flickering in glass votives, the hum of conversation surrounding us. To anyone passing by, we probably looked like any other couple on a Friday night, sharing appetizers, smiling politely, slipping into easy chatter. But under that polished surface, something shifted, something fractured. My husband, Daniel, had always been a steady presence. He was the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence, someone who didn't rattle easily. His laugh was the kind that filled a room without trying. His eyes, warm and steady, always had a way of calming me when my nerves spun out of control. At least, that was the Daniel I thought I knew. That night, as I lifted my glass to my lips, I caught a flicker in his expression, a shadow that didn't belong there. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened, and his eyes darted toward the entrance of the restaurant before quickly returning to me. Then he leaned in closer, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered, "Act normal." For a split second I froze. The words sliced through me, sharp and cold. Act normal. What did that mean? My stomach clenched, my pulse thundering in my ears. The clinking glasses, the low laughter around us, the music drifting faintly from the speakers, all of it faded until all I could hear were those two words looping in my mind. I pulled back slightly, searching his face for an explanation, but his expression had already shifted into something practiced, something deceptively calm. He was smiling again, nodding as our friend cracked a joke about work, his voice sliding smoothly into the conversation like nothing had happened. But I knew something had. I sat there, my fork hovering above my plate, my appetite dissolving as I stumbled
like wildfire. Why would he tell me to act normal? Was someone watching us? Did he see something I didn't? Or worse, was he hiding something from me? I stole a glance around the restaurant, scanning the room as though answers might appear between the clinking glasses and flickering candles. Couples leaned close across their tables, waiters weaved between chairs carrying trays of steaming food, and a group of young professionals laughed loudly near the bar. Nothing seemed out of place. Nothing except Daniel. I tried to ground myself by remembering the man I knew. The man who once pulled me close on our wedding night, whispering promises against my hair. The man who rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep, who always knew the right joke to crack when I was spiraling with worry. But that man wasn't sitting across from me anymore. The man in front of me had a mask on, a mask so convincing that even our closest friends couldn't see the crack in its surface. Only I could, because I knew the rhythm of his breath, the way his hands usually rested so easily on the table, the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, and none of that was here tonight. Dinner stretched on, though the food might as well have been invisible. I couldn't taste a bite. I pushed pasta around my plate, nodding at the conversation while my attention stayed locked on him. He played his role flawlessly, laughing at the right times, asking polite questions, even reaching for my hand once across the table as if everything was fine. His grip was warm, but there was something mechanical about it, something rehearsed. He wasn't holding me. He was holding up an illusion. As dessert menus were passed around, my confusion curdled into something darker. Fear. My mind leapt to every possible scenario. Was he in trouble? Had he done something illegal? Was someone blackmailing him? Or, an even sharper thought cut through me, was he hiding another life from me? One that could crumble everything we had built together? I tried to shake the thought, but the seed was planted, and once suspicion takes root, it spreads like ivy, winding through every memory, every glance, every silence. Suddenly I was replaying the late nights when he claimed to be working late, the moments he stepped outside to take calls,
the time still wearing that perfect, composed smile. But I had seen it. I knew. And in that instant, I felt the ground beneath me tilt, because whatever secret lived in that phone wasn't meant for me. And as the glow of his screen faded beneath the table, I realized this was only the beginning. I saw the reflection of his phone in his wine glass, and it wasn't an ordinary text. The glow had already unsettled me, but it was when my gaze shifted to the curve of Daniel's wine glass that my pulse began to race. The stem of the glass caught the light, bending it like liquid silver, and in its reflection, I caught a fleeting glimpse of something on his screen. Not just a call, not a harmless notification. The shape of letters was unmistakable, too long for a simple contact name, too structured for a random alert. It was a message he didn't want me to see. I forced myself not to flinch. I sat frozen, staring down at my plate as though I were admiring the swirl of pasta sauce, my fork idly tracing circles while my chest constricted. My throat was dry, my stomach twisting, but I couldn't tear my attention from him. He tilted the phone slightly, shielding it more carefully this time, and when his eyes flicked up to mine, he smiled. That smile, it was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of smile that hides more than it reveals. "Everything okay?" our friend asked, laughing lightly, oblivious to the storm unfolding just inches from them. Daniel chuckled smoothly, setting his phone face down on his lap, his hand resting over it as though he were casually holding his napkin. "Yeah," he said easily, "just work. Can't seem to escape it, even on a Friday night." The lie slid out of him like silk. No hesitation, no falter. If I hadn't seen the reflection, I might have believed him, but I had. And the knowledge of it sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating. The table erupted back into conversation, jokes flying, laughter spilling over the rim of wine glasses, but I couldn't join in. I nodded when expected, smiled when necessary, but inside my mind was unraveling. My husband had just lied to me, right there at a table full of friends, as if it were nothing. And if he could lie so effortlessly about that, what else could he lie about? My thoughts drifted, unwillingly, to the countless little moments that had once seemed harmless. Nights when his phone buzzed after midnight, and he would slide out of bed etched into my memory. All those excuses began to feel like threads in a web I had refused to see. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it really was work. Maybe I was projecting my own insecurities onto him, letting paranoia twist the ordinary into the sinister. But deep down, a voice inside me whispered louder than reason, "You saw it. You know what it was." The longer I sat there, the more suffocating the atmosphere became. My friends laughed, their voices warm and unguarded, but to me, every sound felt like static. My husband sat across from me, nodding, sipping his wine, leaning back in his chair like a man without a care in the world. But I noticed the way his fingers stayed curled protectively around his phone, the way his eyes darted down just slightly when he thought no one was watching. He was pretending. He was performing. And I was the only one in the audience who could see through the act. I excused myself briefly, claiming I needed the restroom. And as I walked through the restaurant, I tried to steady my breathing. My reflection in the bathroom mirror startled me. I looked pale, wide-eyed, like someone who had stumbled into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. I leaned against the sink, gripping the porcelain until my knuckles whitened, whispering to myself, "You're overthinking. You're just tired. Don't make a scene." But another voice echoed louder, sharper. "He's lying to you." When I returned to the table, Daniel's eyes found mine instantly. He smiled, that same polished, practiced smile. But for the first time I noticed the tightness in it. He was nervous. He wasn't as invincible as he pretended to be. That realization gave me the smallest flicker of strength, though it was buried beneath a mountain of doubt. As the night dragged on, I felt like I was playing two roles at once. The dutiful wife, laughing at the right times, clinking my glass during toasts, nodding as our friends spoke about their children's milestones, and the silent detective, cataloging every twitch of his hand, every flicker of his eyes, every beat of silence that stretched too long between us. And then it happened again.
Else entirely, an actor breaking character, retreating to the wings where the real story unfolded. I sat frozen, staring at the empty space he left behind, my chest heaving as if the air itself had grown too thin. I forced a smile at our friends, who barely noticed, caught up in a story about their vacation. But my mind was elsewhere, chasing shadows, replaying every moment of that night, every whisper of suspicion that had built to this point. And as the door swung shut behind him, I knew this wasn't just another call. It was the crack in the foundation of everything I thought I knew, and if I followed it, I might discover a truth I wasn't ready to face. When he came back, his smile was perfect, but his hands were trembling. He slipped back into his chair as though nothing had happened, his blazer falling neatly against his shoulders, his wineglass lifted smoothly to his... To anyone else, he looked like a man who had simply stepped outside for a quick work call. His face was calm, his smile practiced, his voice light as he apologized for the interruption. But my eyes went straight to his hands. They shook, barely, but enough that I could see the subtle tremor as he set his glass back down. Enough to betray him to me, if not to the others at the table. "Sorry about that," he said casually, his tone just a little too bright, like he had rehearsed the words. "One of my clients. Urgent matter. All handled now. Handled." The words stuck in my head like a splinter. He wanted me to believe it was over, that the phone call was nothing more than an inconvenience in the middle of dinner. But his hands told a different story. His eyes, too, if I looked closely enough. There was something sharp behind them, something restless, like a man trying to cage a secret that was clawing its way out. I forced myself to nod, pretending to accept his excuse, but my heart was pounding so loud I thought the others might hear it. Our friends laughed, slipping back into conversation as if nothing unusual had happened. The restaurant buzzed with the hum of voices, the clink of dishes, the faint notes of music floating from the bar. It was all so ordinary, so deceptively normal. And yet, under the surface, I felt the weight of something extraordinary. Suspicion. There was the night, months ago, when he came home late claiming traffic had kept him. His tie was loosened, his hair slightly mussed, and I had hugged him with relief that he was safe. But when I asked what took so long, he avoided my eyes, mumbling about deadlines. I had let it go. Or the time last summer when we planned a weekend getaway. Halfway through the drive, his phone buzzed with a message that made his expression shift in an instant. He claimed it was his boss, but he excused himself from dinner that night for nearly 40 minutes. I had sat on the hotel balcony, staring at the ocean, convincing myself not to ruin our trip by asking questions. And then there were the smaller moments. The way he angled his phone away from me when scrolling. The way he sometimes stepped outside for air, but took his phone with him. The times he had smiled a little too quickly when I asked who was calling. I had told myself not to be paranoid, that I was projecting, that I trusted him. But trust, I realized now, was fragile. It wasn't something you lost all at once. It cracked slowly. Hairline fractures spreading until one day you noticed the whole thing was splintered beyond repair. As dessert arrived, a glossy chocolate tart placed neatly in front of us, I watched him spear a bite with his fork, his hand finally steady again. He caught my eyes across the table, holding them for a second too long. There was a question in his gaze, or maybe a warning. It said, "Don't ask, don't push, play along." So I did. I smiled, I ate, I laughed when expected, but inside I was unraveling. Every word he spoke, every motion he made was a puzzle I couldn't solve. And the more I tried, the more certain I became that he was hiding something. The drive home was quiet. Our friends had hugged us goodbye outside the restaurant, their breath warm with wine and laughter, before heading in the opposite direction. As Daniel and I walked toward our car, the night air felt cooler than it should have, crisp against my skin, heavy with the weight of silence. I slid into the passenger seat, my fingers curling tightly around the strap of my purse. Daniel started the car, his movements smooth, precise, practiced. He reached for my hand once, a gesture that might have comforted me. Then it happened. As we pulled onto our street, my phone synced automatically to the car's system, CarPlay lighting up the dashboard screen with a faint glow. I glanced up at the display, expecting the usual, directions, music, maybe a notification from a friend. But what appeared instead made my stomach drop. It wasn't my phone that had triggered the notification. It was his. His device had connected too, synced automatically like it always did. And the words that flashed across the screen were not the kind of message a husband expects to explain to his wife. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the screen lit the interior of the car with a truth too bright to ignore. And in that moment, I realized the call at dinner had only been the beginning. The real revelation was waiting for me in the glowing letters on our dashboard. The voice from CarPlay didn't belong to me. It belonged to her. It happened so quickly that for a moment I thought I had imagined it. The dashboard screen flickered, the soft glow cutting through the dim interior of the car, and then a voice filled the speakers, clear, feminine, achingly familiar. My breath lodged in my throat as the sound washed over me, sharp and intimate in a space that should have belonged only to Daniel and me. "Hey, are you alone?" The words came in a hushed tone, threaded with something warm, something personal. My hands went cold, clutching my purse so tightly that my knuckles ached. The world around me seemed to fall away. The hum of the engine, the faint rattle of the air conditioning vents, even the rhythm of the tires against the road. All I could hear was her voice. Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened instantly, his knuckles whitening as he slammed a finger against the console, fumbling to silence the call. But it was too late. I had already heard it. The voice didn't belong to a stranger. It belonged to someone I knew. I sat frozen, staring straight ahead as though the streetlights outside could anchor me to reality. My chest rose and fell in shallow gasps, my mind ricocheting between disbelief and recognition. That voice had drifted through my home before, across dinner tables, through casual conversations, wrapped in the safety of friendship. I felt my stomach twist, a sharp ache spreading outward like poison. "Everything okay?" I asked, tried to sweep up the shards before I noticed. It was the face of a man trying to erase evidence before the truth could be seen. But this wasn't a vase. This was our life, our marriage, our vows. As silence stretched between us, memories crashed in without permission. Our wedding day, the warmth of his hand gripping mine as he whispered, "I'll never let you down." The way he kissed my forehead the night I miscarried, holding me as though he could carry my grief with his strength. The mornings when he brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, sliding the mug across the counter with a smile that made me believe in forever. Those memories felt like shards now, glittering pieces of a story that might never have been real. Had I been in love with a man who only pretended to be who I needed? Or had I simply ignored the cracks until they grew too wide to hide? I stared at the screen, still glowing faintly with the trace of the call, and a war raged inside me. Part of me wanted to scream, to demand answers right then and there, to tear the truth out of him no matter how ugly it was. But another part of me, quieter, colder, knew that if I revealed how much I had heard, I might lose my only chance at finding out the full truth. So I swallowed my rage, burying it deep beneath a mask of composure, just as he had done at dinner. "Must have been important," I said softly, my tone carefully neutral. His eyes flicked toward me for a fraction of a second, sharp and assessing, as though trying to gauge how much I knew. "Yeah," he murmured, "but not something you need to worry about." That phrase, "not something you need to worry about," echoed in my head. A phrase designed to soothe, to dismiss, to keep me in the dark. And suddenly I hated it. I hated how easily he said it, how comfortable he seemed in the role of gatekeeper to my own life. The rest of the drive passed in silence, heavy and suffocating. My mind replayed that voice over and over, each repetition like a dagger twisting deeper. I knew that tone. I knew that inflection, and with every passing second, certainty replaced doubt. It wasn't just a colleague. It wasn't work. It was her. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light spilling across the front of our house, I felt a strange sitting on the edge of the bed, my mind spiraling. I thought about the life we had built together, the mortgage payments, the vacations, the late-night arguments that always ended in apologies and promises. I thought about how many of those promises I had clung to like lifelines, and now I wondered if all along I had been holding on to a rope that he had already cut. When he finally joined me, his smile was softer, more convincing. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head, and murmured, "Long day. Let's just get some sleep." Sleep. As if sleep could erase the sound of her voice echoing through our car. As if I could lie down beside him without wondering who he truly belonged to. I closed my eyes, my breathing steady, pretending to drift off. But inside, I was wide awake, replaying every word, every sound, every tone from that call. And then, just before sleep threatened to take me, I remembered one more thing. The last phrase I had caught before he silenced the call. Her voice had been hushed, almost conspiratorial. So, tonight? The word lingered like smoke in my mind, heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Tonight. And as the darkness pressed in around me, I realized the call wasn't just a betrayal. It was a countdown. I replayed the call until the words etched themselves into my bones. It should have been a fleeting thing, just a snippet of sound, an accidental echo from the car's system, but it wouldn't leave me. That voice, her voice, filled my mind like a haunting refrain, the syllables burrowing deeper every time I let myself hear them again in memory. And then, that final phrase, short and loaded, like a secret slipping through the cracks. So, tonight? I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my body still, but my mind on fire. The words looped endlessly, each repetition scraping away at me until I could barely breathe. Tonight. What did it mean? A meeting? An escape? Something harmless or something that would shatter the last pieces of the life I thought I had? Beside me, Daniel slept soundly, or at least pretended to. His breathing was steady, slow, the rhythm of someone at peace, but I didn't trust it. I didn't trust anything anymore. I felt like I was lying next to a stranger, my body separated from words. It wasn't the clipped professionalism of a colleague, not the casual ease of a friend. It was softer, heavier, like the kind of voice you use when you know you belong to someone in ways the rest of the world can't see. The pressure of it all pressed against my chest until I couldn't lie still anymore. I slipped quietly from the bed and padded to the living room, sinking onto the couch in the dark. The silence of the house surrounded me, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the occasional tick of the clock on the wall. I buried my face in my hands and finally let the tears come. They weren't neat or quiet. They tore through me in gasps and sobs, racking my body until I shook. I wept for the trust I had lost, for the promises that now felt like lies, for the love I had believed was unshakable. The sound of my own grief filled the room, but there was no comfort, no hand to steady me, no shoulder to lean on. The man who should have been my anchor was upstairs, and I couldn't even look at him without wondering whose words still echoed in his ears. As I sat there, drowning in sorrow, a memory rose unbidden, clear and sharp. I was 19, sitting at the kitchen table of my childhood home. My mother had been folding laundry, her hands moving with practiced ease as she studied me with that quiet intensity she always carried. I had been crying then, too, over some boy who had broken my heart, some promises that had been as fragile as glass. She had listened without interruption, nodding gently, until finally she set down the towel in her lap and reached across the table for my hand. "Trust," she had said softly, her thumb brushing my knuckles, "isn't about believing someone is perfect. It's about knowing that even in their imperfection, they won't betray the core of who you are together." I remembered looking at her through blurred vision, my voice raw as I asked, "But how do you know if someone will betray you?" Her eyes had softened, filled with something like sorrow and wisdom intertwined. "You don't," she whispered. "That's the risk. That's love. You step out onto the water with them, hoping they won't let you drown. And if they do," she paused, her voice breaking just slightly, "then you have to decide when—" Around that quick excuse in the car, the way his voice grew flat when he said, "It's work." He was practiced at this. Confrontation would only give him time to sharpen his performance. But if I stayed silent, if I let him believe I was still blind, maybe, just maybe, I could learn the full truth. The thought terrified me. It made me feel deceitful, like I was playing a part in my own marriage.
But what choice did I have? How could I fight a battle when I didn't even know the size of the enemy? I curled up on the couch, pulling a throw blanket over my shoulders, my body trembling as exhaustion finally pressed down. My mind kept circling that one word, tonight, until it became more than a word, until it was a clock ticking in my ears. I imagined them together, imagined secret plans unfolding in whispers I wasn't meant to hear. My stomach twisted until I thought I might be sick. Somewhere between dread and exhaustion, I drifted into a restless half-sleep. I dreamed of shadows moving through the house, of voices echoing through the walls, of Daniel's hand slipping from mine as he walked away into darkness. Each time I startled awake, the silence of the room pressed back in, heavy and cold. Finally, sometime in the thick silence of early morning, I stirred at the faint creak of the floorboards above. My heart pounded instantly, jolting me fully awake. The sound was soft, deliberate, not the clumsy weight of someone rolling over in sleep. I strained to listen, every muscle taut. Then I heard it, the faint click of the bedroom door, the careful padding of footsteps on the stairs. I sat frozen, my breath caught, my pulse roaring in my ears. Daniel. I watched from the shadows of the living room as he descended the stairs, his movements slow, cautious, as though he didn't want to wake me. His phone glowed faintly in his hand, casting a pale light across his face. His expression was unreadable, tight, determined. He moved toward the front door, slipping his shoes on with practiced quiet, his thumb already moving across the phone screen. And in that moment, as I sat hidden in the dark, I realized
every movement slow and deliberate, as though mimicking his secrecy would somehow shield me from the dread wrapping tighter around my chest. I eased open the front door, the night air spilling in cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of rain-soaked earth. He was ahead of me, walking quickly down the sidewalk, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and hushed. I couldn't make out the words, just the cadence, the rhythm of someone speaking intimately, urgently. He glanced around once, twice, like a man afraid of being caught, then continued on, turning the corner toward the small park at the end of the street. I followed, my steps soundless on the pavement, every nerve alive with tension. I kept my distance, close enough to see the silhouette of his body, far enough to avoid the reach of his glance. My breath came shallow, my body both terrified and electrified by the hunt. I felt like an intruder in my own marriage, a spy in a life I thought I already knew. The park was deserted, the lampposts casting sickly yellow circles of light onto the damp grass. Daniel stopped beneath one, the glow falling over him like a spotlight. His back was to me, his head bowed toward the phone, his voice barely more than a whisper. I pressed myself against the rough bark of a tree, my cheek scraping against it as I strained to hear. His tone was softer now, warmer, the way he used to speak to me late at night when we first fell in love. It made my stomach twist violently, as though I were watching him hand pieces of our marriage to someone else, carving away at the life we had built together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rush forward, snatch the phone from his hand, and demand to know who she was. But fear rooted me to the ground. Not fear of him, but of the truth. Because the truth would mean that everything, the laughter, the vows, the memories carefully stitched together, was fragile enough to unravel with a single whispered word. The air was cold, but sweat slicked my palms as I clung to the tree for balance. I remembered the way Daniel had once promised me forever, his hand warm against my cheek, his voice steady as he vowed never to hurt me. That memory clashed violently against the image in front of me now. His body turned away, his words spilling into the night for words slipping between the branches overhead. Yes, I'll make sure she doesn't find out. The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. My vision blurred, my ears rang. She. Not they, not someone. She. The confirmation was a knife to the chest, sharp and merciless. Whoever this woman was, she was real, she was close, and she was dangerous enough that my husband had to shield her existence with secrecy. Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back, forcing myself to keep listening.
I couldn't afford to collapse now. Daniel shifted, his free hand running through his hair in a nervous gesture I had seen 1,000 times before. But it wasn't nerves about me. It was nerves about keeping her hidden. Every word he whispered shredded me further, each syllable a reminder that I was unraveling in real time. The marriage I thought was mine was bleeding away in front of me, carried into the night on the sound of his voice. And then, just as I thought I couldn't bear another second, it happened. His voice dropped lower, his tone sharp with intensity, and I heard it, clear, undeniable. My name. He said my name into the phone. I staggered back against the tree, my breath catching in my throat. Why would he say my name to her? What did it mean? Was I part of their secret? A pawn in whatever conversation they were weaving together in the dark? The sound of my own name, whispered into a call I wasn't meant to hear, struck deeper than any betrayal I had imagined. It was no longer just about secrecy. It was about me, about my place in whatever web he was spinning. And in that single moment, as my name lingered in the air between him and the night, I realized I wasn't just a wife on the outside of a lie. I was inside it, tangled in ways I couldn't yet see. Why was he saying my name to another woman? The question dug into me like glass. I leaned harder against the rough bark of the tree, my breath shallow, my heart racing so violently it felt as if it were trying to climb out of my chest. Daniel's voice still carried faintly through the night air, hushed, tense, threaded with words I couldn't fully hear, but my name lingered, echoing inside me like an accusation. My mind spun, clawing at possibilities. Was he warning her about me, telling her I was suspicious?
Continued, muffled and indistinct. I heard him laugh once, low and nervous, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in months. That laugh sliced through me worse than any argument ever had. It was proof of intimacy, of familiarity, of something shared. The way he used to laugh when we were first falling in love, when the world was only ours. Now it belonged to her. I squeezed my eyes shut, the memories rushing in unbidden. The nights we spent sprawled on the couch, wine glasses in hand, making plans for a future that felt unbreakable. The way he'd taken my hand at our wedding, his thumb brushing against my knuckles as if memorizing me, grounding us both in forever. The night he whispered that no matter what storms came, I would always be his anchor. And yet here we were, years later, and I was hiding behind a tree in the middle of the night, listening to my husband weave my name into a story I couldn't understand. A part of me begged for reason. Maybe it wasn't betrayal. Maybe he was saying my name in defense, explaining to her why he couldn't leave me, why I mattered. Maybe this was something protective, something twisted but not cruel. But suspicion had already sunk its claws into me, and once suspicion takes root, reason rarely survives. I remembered a time, years ago, when I'd noticed him stepping outside to take calls. "Just work," he had said, brushing it off with a quick kiss to my forehead. I had believed him. Back then, I had wanted so badly to trust that nothing could shake us. But trust doesn't break with one grand betrayal. It cracks slowly, in moments that feel insignificant until they bleed together and form a wound you can't ignore. And now, standing in that park, I realized those cracks had been forming for a long time. His late nights at the office, the sudden secrecy around his phone, the way he had started sleeping with it face down on the nightstand. Small things, explainable things, until they weren't, until they led me here. I forced myself to focus again, straining for every sound. His voice grew sharper, more urgent. "No, she can't know." Not yet. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. My knees threatened to buckle, and I had to grip the tree to keep from collapsing. She can't know. Not yet. The phrase coiled in my gut, heavy, closed, as if gathering the strength to return home and slip back into the skin of a faithful husband. I pressed myself deeper into the shadows, holding my breath as he turned and began walking back toward the house. His steps were steady, unhurried, like a man who believed his secrets were safe. I waited until he was gone, until his silhouette disappeared down the street, before I allowed myself to move. My legs were trembling as I stumbled out from behind the tree,
every nerve buzzing, my mind a storm of fear and fury. I followed at a distance, careful, silent, until I saw him disappear into the house. I waited a full minute before slipping inside myself. He was already in bed when I crept into the bedroom. His body turned away, his breaths slow and measured like a man deep in sleep. But I knew better. He wasn't sleeping. He was pretending, just as I was pretending. We were two actors on the same stage, both too afraid to acknowledge the script we were really performing. I slid into bed beside him, my body rigid, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. The silence between us roared louder than any argument. Every time he shifted, every exhale, every subtle movement felt like proof of his betrayal. Sleep didn't come. My mind replayed the words over and over. She can't, no, not yet. And beneath them, the sound of my own name, spoken into a phone that wasn't meant for me. Hours passed in restless silence. The glow of morning crept slowly into the room, painting the walls pale gray. Daniel stirred, stretching, yawning with the performance of a man waking from a peaceful night. He kissed my shoulder softly, as if nothing were wrong, as if he hadn't just shattered the foundation of our life hours before. I forced myself to respond with stillness, feigning sleep, but inside a storm raged. I couldn't confront him yet, not without more than fragments and whispers. I needed proof, and proof came sooner than I expected. That afternoon, while he showered, I wandered into the living room, pacing as my thoughts consumed me. My eyes landed on his jacket, draped carelessly over the arm of the couch. I don't know what pushed me to check. Instinct?
The device should. It wasn't just plastic and glass, it was proof, solid and undeniable, of the gnawing suspicions that had been haunting me for weeks. My hands trembled as I turned it over, my thumb brushing across the scuffed screen. It was battered, older than the sleek phone he carried everywhere, and yet somehow it felt more dangerous, more alive. For a moment I just stood there in the living room, frozen in the quiet hum of our house, staring at the object that had the power to dismantle everything I thought I knew about my marriage. My pulse was frantic, my breath shallow, as I weighed the choice before me. If I opened it, I would cross a line. I would step into the shadows my husband had built, and there would be no turning back. But the truth had already been chasing me, clawing at my sanity, and here it was, in my hands. With shaking fingers, I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life, dull and cracked around the edges, but functional. A lock screen appeared, a passcode required. My heart sank. Of course it was locked. Of course he had thought ahead. But then, just as despair started to pull me under, my eyes widened. There was no passcode. The phone unlocked immediately, as if daring me to look. The home screen was bare, no pictures of us, no family memories, just a bland black wallpaper. I swiped, my stomach churning, and opened the messaging app. That was when my world tilted. Rows of conversations stretched before me, none of them familiar. No friends from our neighborhood, no numbers I recognized. Only names and initials that meant nothing to me. C, Mark S, unknown, and one labeled only with a heart emoji. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped the phone. I tapped the conversation with the heart. The thread opened, and a flood of messages filled the screen. My eyes scanned the words, each one slicing deeper than the last. Last night was perfect. She almost caught me, but I handled it. Don't worry, she won't know. My chest constricted, my throat closing as tears welled in my eyes. It wasn't vague anymore. It wasn't paranoia or overthinking. It was betrayal, plain and undeniable. I sank onto the couch, clutching the phone like it might burn me if I let go. My body shook with silent sobs, my tears slipping hot and relentless. Forgotten anniversaries. The way he had started locking his main phone when he never used to. The new cologne he suddenly wore, saying it was just a sample from the store. I thought about my mother, the conversation we had years ago, when she told me that trust was a fragile thing. Don't ignore the small things, she had said gently, her eyes soft but knowing. They grow into truths you wish you had faced sooner. I had brushed it off, believing Daniel was different, believing love was enough to shield us from cracks. But love hadn't saved me. Trust hadn't saved me. I was staring at his secrets now, glowing on a second phone he thought I would never find. I couldn't breathe. My chest heaved as I scrolled again, desperate for something, anything, that might soften the blow, that might prove there was another explanation. But all I found was more evidence. Dozens of late-night calls. Messages time-stamped at hours when he had been lying next to me, pretending to be asleep. One message, sent just days ago, stopped me cold. She can't know, at least not yet. The words burned into me, etching themselves across my skin like fire. My vision blurred, my breath hitched, and I pressed the phone to my chest as if I could squeeze the truth out of it. Not yet. What did that mean? That he was planning to tell me? That he was stringing me along until the moment was right to destroy me? Or worse, that there was something darker waiting, something I couldn't even imagine. My mind spiraled, dragging me into every possible scenario. Maybe he was planning to leave me. Maybe he was already gone in every way that mattered. Maybe there was another life, another woman, another home, and I was just the shadow he hadn't stepped out of yet. I thought back to the laughter at dinner, the way he had leaned across the table, whispered, "Act normal." It hadn't been a request. It had been a directive, a warning, as if he knew the performance was fragile, as if he feared the truth would burst through the seams of our carefully constructed life. And now I understood why. The betrayal wasn't abstract anymore. It was here, in my hands, written in his words. A second phone, a second life, and a second Daniel I didn't recognize at all. I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the messages, scrolling until my eyes ached and my tears that last message, as if the letters themselves might rearrange and give me an answer. But they didn't change. They stayed etched into the screen, mocking me with their certainty. She can't know. At least not yet. Not yet. It was those two words that broke me. They weren't just vague promises in the context of an affair. They were ominous, calculated, the kind of phrase that belonged in whispered conversations behind locked doors. Whatever he was hiding wasn't just betrayal. It was planned. It had a timeline, and I was standing in the middle of it without even knowing what was coming. My heart pounded against my ribs, the sound deafening in the silence of our home. I set the phone down on the coffee table, staring at it like it was a venomous snake that might strike if I moved too quickly. My hands shook. My breathing came uneven. My body buzzing with adrenaline and dread. Was it another woman? That would be the obvious answer. The late-night calls, the secrecy, the careful whispers. My mind immediately went there, constructing images of him with someone else, laughing with the same tenderness he once gave me. Holding another woman with the same devotion he had promised was mine. But the phrasing didn't fit. She can't know, at least not yet. If it was just an affair, why would there be a timeline? Why would he need to prepare for my knowing, as if it was inevitable? That wasn't how infidelity worked, not usually. Affairs lived in the shadows, hidden until they slipped out accidentally. They weren't planned revelations. The thought chilled me. Was it something darker? Something beyond betrayal? My stomach twisted painfully, bile rising in my throat as my imagination filled in the blanks with scenarios I didn't want to face. Money, crime, secrets that weren't just about broken vows, but about danger. I pressed the heels of my palms against my eyes, willing the spiral to stop. But once paranoia takes root, it doesn't let go easily. It dug its claws deeper, pulling me further into a storm I couldn't escape. I thought back to all the nights Daniel had been absent, to the explanations that had always sounded so neat, so polished. The late meeting, brushing the hair from my face, whispering that I was everything. I remembered how proud he'd looked when we signed the papers on this, telling me that it was our sanctuary, our forever. Now those same walls felt like they were closing in, suffocating me with the weight of all the lies they had heard whispered under their roof.
Sleep was impossible. The hours bled together, my eyes raw from tears, my body trembling with exhaustion. I kept glancing toward the stairs, half expecting him to come down, to catch me holding the phone, to expose the confrontation I wasn't ready for. But he never came. He slept, or pretended to sleep, through the night, leaving me alone with my unraveling mind. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't live in fragments anymore. I needed to know what "not yet" meant. I needed to see where he went, who he spoke to, what world existed just beyond the surface of the life we shared. The chance came sooner than I expected. Daniel moved through the morning with ease, whistling softly as he brewed coffee, kissing my cheek as though last night's shadows had never existed. His mask was flawless, his performance convincing. But I saw the tension in the corners of his eyes, the way his gaze lingered on me for a moment too long, as if gauging whether I suspected anything. I played along, forcing smiles, nodding when he spoke, all while my chest burned with the effort of pretending. When he left for work, I waited. I gave him a full 15 minutes before slipping on my jacket, grabbing my keys, and stepping out the door. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I started the car, my breath quick and uneven, every nerve braced for what I was about to do. I followed him. The streets blurred as I trailed his car at a careful distance, my stomach twisting tighter with every turn he took. He wasn't heading to the office. That much became clear within minutes. He drove past the highway exit that led downtown, weaving instead into quieter neighborhoods, roads I didn't recognize. My grip on the wheel tightened, my knuckles white, my mind racing with questions I wasn't ready to answer. Finally, he slowed, pulling into the lot of a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and an antique shop.
Seen in months. Then his eyes lit up. Recognition, affection, something more, and he moved toward a booth in the corner. I froze. Someone was waiting for him. From where I stood, I couldn't see her face. Only her hand, resting on the table, fingers tapping nervously against the coffee cup. But I knew. I didn't need to see more. The way his shoulders relaxed, the way his entire presence shifted, told me everything. Whoever she was the one on the other end of those calls, the one behind the words that had carved me open in the dead of night. I pressed my hand against the cold glass of the window, my body shaking with the force of silent rage, heartbreak, and fear. I wanted to storm inside, to demand answers, to tear away the lies. But I couldn't, not yet. Not until I understood the full extent of what I was facing. So I stayed outside, hidden in plain sight, my breath fogging the glass as I watched him lean forward, speaking softly, intimately, to the woman across from him. And in that moment, standing in the shadows of the life I thought I knew, I realized I was no longer just suspicious. I was a witness. And I had to follow this thread, no matter where it led, even if it destroyed me. He wasn't meeting a lover. He was meeting a stranger who knew my name. For the longest time, I stood outside the cafe window, my breath fogging the glass, watching my husband lean forward in that booth with the ease of a man who had something to hide. My chest was tight, my pulse racing as I braced myself to finally lay eyes on her, the woman who had invaded my marriage, the voice that had bled into my car through CarPlay, the shadow who lived in the corners of my home. But when the figure across from him lifted her head, my stomach lurched with confusion. It wasn't a woman at all. It was a man, older than Daniel, with sharp features carved deep into his face, dressed in a dark jacket that looked more businesslike than romantic. His hair was graying at the temples, his posture rigid, his gaze sharp and unflinching. For a split second, my mind scrambled for an explanation. A colleague? Some client? A random contact he didn't want me to know about? But then I saw it. The way they leaned in closer, their voices hushed, their eyes darting toward the door and windows as though they were guarding. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a gasp, my mind spinning faster than I could process. Was Daniel protecting me from something, or orchestrating something I couldn't even fathom? My stomach turned, the sour taste of bile rising in my throat. Daniel shifted in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together, his shoulders tense.
I had never seen him look like this before. So small, so uncertain, like a man stripped of the confidence he wore like armor. He nodded slowly at something the stranger said, his fingers tapping nervously against the table. Then, clear as day, I heard it. Her name is already on the list. The words sent ice flooding through my veins. My name, my life, my existence, discussed like a line item in some hidden agenda. I stumbled back from the window, my vision blurring, the world spinning around me. The man's words rattled inside my skull, clanging like church bells. What list? What plan? Why me? I pressed myself against the wall beside the cafe entrance, my body trembling as I tried to steady my breathing. Through the thin wall, muffled voices carried just enough for me to catch bits and pieces. She can't know until we're certain. If she finds out early, everything falls apart. No turning back once the folder is delivered. The folder. My skin prickled, my body buzzing with terror. Every nerve screamed for me to run, to get back in my car, to pretend I hadn't seen any of this. But curiosity, the same relentless force that had dragged me out of bed to follow Daniel into the night, pinned me to the spot. The minutes stretched like hours. I clutched my purse to my chest, the strap cutting into my shoulder as my fingers trembled against the worn fabric. Through the narrow window at the corner of the building, I caught sight of the man shifting in his seat, his expression darkening, his hand dipping into a briefcase beside him. When he placed it on the table, my heart skipped a beat. A folder. Thick, plain, unmarked except for a small red tab at the top. Daniel hesitated. I saw the movement from where I stood, the way he leaned back, his brows furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He shook his head once, firmly, like a man refusing poison, but the stranger pushed it closer, his jaw set, his eyes unblinking. For a moment, Daniel resisted. His hand hovered, clenched into a fist, before slowly, hesitantly, relaxing. He reached out. His fingers closed around the folder, pulling it toward one of those candid moments that had felt like love at the time. And now, it was in the hands of a stranger, hidden in a folder I wasn't meant to see. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth, my body shaking violently. Every question, every suspicion, every fear I had tried to silence crashed down all at once. Why was my photo in that folder? Why was my husband sitting across from a stranger discussing me as if I were part of some dangerous plan? My knees weakened. My back pressed harder against the cold brick wall. My entire world spinning out of control. The betrayal of another woman had seemed unbearable, but this was something else entirely. This wasn't infidelity. This was something darker, something I wasn't prepared to face. And as I watched him slide that folder into his bag, my picture tucked safely inside, I realized that my husband's secrets weren't just about another life, they were about mine. And whatever was coming, it was already closing in on me. My face stared back at me from that folder, and I felt the ground shift. For as long as I live, I don't think I'll ever forget that instant. The split-second glimpse of my own photograph, my smile frozen, my eyes catching the light. An ordinary day immortalized in an image. Sitting inside a folder passed between my husband and a stranger. It wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't supposed to exist in this moment, in this place, under these circumstances. Yet there it was. Undeniable proof that I wasn't just part of his secret. I was the secret. I pressed myself harder against the brick wall outside the cafe, my chest heaving as though the air itself had turned too heavy to breathe. My pulse roared in my ears, drowning out the hum of traffic, the chatter of late-night diners, even the footsteps that clicked past me on the sidewalk. All I could think was, why me? Why now? Up until this moment, my suspicions had taken familiar shapes. Another woman. An affair. The late-night calls, the whispers, the tremors in his hands. All of it had pointed to betrayal of the heart. But this was something darker, stranger. This wasn't into my skin. She doesn't remember. What didn't I remember? Why was my memory even a part of this conversation? Suddenly, moments of the past year rushed back with new, terrifying light. The way Danielle had hovered after my minor car accident last spring, insisting on driving me everywhere for weeks even after the doctor had cleared me. The nights he had jolted awake in bed, drenched in sweat, whispering my name like it was a plea. The way he had looked at me sometimes, long, searching stares, like he was checking to see if I was still intact, still me. Had I brushed all of that off too easily? Had I convinced myself it was love, devotion, when really it was fear? My stomach twisted violently. Maybe he wasn't cheating. Maybe the truth was even worse. Inside, Daniel finally pulled the folder toward himself, his knuckles white against the manila edges. He didn't open it right away. His hesitation was clear, almost painful to watch. He shook his head slowly, his lips moving around words I couldn't hear, but the stranger cut him off with a sharp gesture. And then, suddenly, the stranger's voice rose just enough for me to hear it crystal clear. "She can't know, not after the accident." The word slammed into me like a car skidding off black ice. Accident. My body went cold, every muscle seizing at once. I stumbled backward from the cafe window, nearly tripping over the curb, my breath catching in my throat. The accident. My accident. The one I had convinced myself was nothing more than a fender bender, a slip of bad luck on a rainy night. The one Daniel had hovered over me for, insisted was a big deal, even when the doctors had said I was fine. Had I been wrong? Was there something more to that night than I had ever been told? I crouched low against the wall, my hands trembling so violently that I could barely hold on to the strap of my purse. Every sound around me grew distorted. The hiss of a bus's brakes, the chatter of a couple passing by, the metallic rattle of a trash bin being rolled down the street. The only words that made sense were the ones echoing inside my skull. Not after the accident. I tried to steady myself, tried to think logically. If this was about the accident, then Daniel's secrets
To quiet the rising panic, I wanted to burst through those cafe doors, demand answers, rip the folder from Daniel's hands, and scream until the truth poured out of him. But another part of me, the part still clinging to the faint hope that this was somehow all for my protection, held me back. What if I confronted him too soon and ruined whatever fragile balance he was trying to keep? What if my interruption made things worse? Tears blurred my vision, hot and relentless. The man I had trusted with my vows, my life, my future, was sitting in a cafe with a stranger, discussing me like I was a problem to be managed, a case file to be contained. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself to stay hidden in the shadows. Because one thing was clear. If I walked away now, I might never learn the truth. Inside, Daniel finally tucked the folder into his bag, his movements stiff, mechanical. The stranger's eyes never left him, sharp as a hawk's, unyielding. And then, just as they rose to leave, I caught one last fragment of their conversation. Words that would haunt me long after the cafe door swung shut behind them. If she ever remembers. The rest was lost to the noise of the street, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. I stayed frozen in place, my knees weak, my body trembling, my face, my memories, my accident. My husband's secrets weren't about a mistress or late-night calls or some hidden second life. They were about me, and whatever I had forgotten, whatever he had buried, was something dangerous enough that strangers were now involved. And as the night closed in around me, one truth became impossible to ignore. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was terrified, because the answers I was chasing might not only break my marriage, they might destroy me. The accident I thought I had forgotten suddenly came back to life. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the folder, my face staring back at me, my husband's pale hands gripping the edge like he was trying to keep the truth from spilling out. The stranger's voice echoing in my head. She doesn't remember. Not after the accident. The word wouldn't leave me. Accident. For months, maybe even years, I had told myself it had been nothing more than a brush with bad luck. A rainy night, slick roads, a car that slid too fast into an intersection, buried so deeply they barely seemed real. The sound of screeching tires, the flash of headlights too close, too sudden, the sharp snap of metal bending against metal. And then, darkness. Not sleep,
not dreams. Just black, heavy, and absolute. I remembered waking in the hospital, Daniel at my side. His eyes bloodshot, his hand locked around mine, his voice hoarse when he whispered, "You're safe. That's all that matters." I remembered the doctor's explanation. Mild concussion, disorientation, no long-term damage. They said my memory loss was temporary, that gaps would fill themselves in with time. But the gaps never really did. Instead, I convinced myself they weren't important. I told myself it was better not to remember, better to move on. And Daniel had agreed. He had always been quick to redirect the conversation, to brush it away. "It's over," he would say. "You're fine now. Don't torture yourself with the past." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. But now, with that word echoing in my head, I realized maybe he hadn't been trying to protect me from pain. Maybe he had been trying to protect himself. The thought gutted me. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, pressing my palms against my temples, willing the memories to come. What had really happened that night? Was Daniel even there when it happened? Had someone else been? Had I been alone? Every possibility spun around me like shards of glass, cutting deeper the more I tried to hold on to them. Hours passed in restless silence, my thoughts looping endlessly. And then, just as the sky began to gray with early dawn, a memory surfaced so sharply it made me gasp. It was the voice. Not Daniel's, not the doctor's. A woman's voice. Sharp, urgent, trembling. I couldn't remember the words, only the tone. Fear, desperation, something like pleading. That voice had been the last thing I'd heard before the darkness swallowed me. I jolted upright, my hands clutching the edge of the table. A woman. Who was she? And why had Daniel never mentioned anyone else being there that night? For the first time, I considered the possibility that Daniel hadn't just been hiding the truth. He might have been rewriting it entirely. All day, I stumbled through life days after the crash. My mother had been there, stroking my hair, her eyes swollen from crying. Daniel had stepped into the hallway to talk to the doctor, and I remembered the way her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sweetheart, there's something," she began. But then Daniel returned, and she stopped. I never thought about it again, assuming it was just her grief. Now I wondered, had she been about to tell me the truth? I felt betrayed, not only by Daniel, but by my own mind. My memories were like shattered glass, fragments sharp enough to hurt, but too broken to build a whole picture. I wanted answers, but every time I reached for them, my hands came away bloodied by confusion and fear. That night, long after Daniel and I had gone to bed, I lay wide awake. His breathing was steady beside me, slow and deep, the rhythm of a man at peace. I wanted to shake him awake, demand he tell me everything, but fear rooted me to the mattress. Fear that if I asked, he would finally confirm what I already knew, that my marriage wasn't built on trust at all, but on lies. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned, until the silence felt unbearable, and then I heard it, the faint creak of the floorboards. I turned my head, slowly, my heart pounding. Daniel was no longer beside me. The blanket was folded back neatly, his side of the bed empty. My body went cold. I slid out of bed, bare feet quiet against the hardwood, and followed the sound of movement. The glow of faint light flickered down the hallway, seeping from under the door to his office. I crept closer, each step measured, my breath shallow. My hand pressed against the wall for balance as I leaned toward the crack of the door. Through it, I saw the glow, not of his computer screen, but of flame. Daniel knelt by a metal wastebasket, the firelight flickering across his face. His expression was hard, determined, his jaw tight as he fed page after page into the flames. The paper curled and blackened, the fire consuming it hungrily. I pressed my hand to my mouth, stifling the cry that threatened to escape. He was burning something. Documents, records, maybe even the very folder I had seen pass to him in the cafe. And as I stood there in the shadows, paralyzed by horror, one thought screamed louder than all the rest. Whatever he was destroying wasn't just paper. It was my past, my truth. Harder. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the flames as if feeding them was the only thing keeping him alive. His movements were sharp, deliberate, as page after page curled into ash. The fire flickered in his glasses, reflecting an intensity that made my skin crawl. I pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. My breath came in shallow gasps, the kind you can't control no matter how hard you try. I wanted to call out his name, to demand answers, but the words turned to stone in my throat. Who was this man? My husband? The man who once kissed my forehead every morning before work? Who brought me soup when I was sick? Who promised me safety and stability? Was he even real? Or had he been playing a role this whole time, smiling by day and burning secrets by night? The crackle of the fire filled the silence. The smell of smoke leaked into the hallway, sharp and acrid. He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't look around to see if anyone was watching. That was what terrified me most, how calm he seemed. Like this wasn't the first time, like he had done this before. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth. The folder, the documents, the accident. He was erasing everything, wiping away the truth before it could catch up with him. And maybe before it could catch up with me. My knees threatened to give out. I slid down the wall, crouching low, my body shaking uncontrollably. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't look away. Each page that vanished into the fire felt like a piece of my life I would never get back. I thought of my mother, of the night in the hospital when she had tried to tell me something but stopped when Daniel returned. Had she known? Had she seen this side of him long before I did? And if she had, why hadn't she told me? Why had she let me marry him, live with him, trust him with every vulnerable part of me? The air grew heavier, filled with smoke and dread. I felt trapped in my own home, a guest in the walls I had painted, the rooms I had decorated. The man who shared my bed was now the man who made me feel unsafe in every corner of this house. I wanted to run, grab my keys, slip out the back door, and never one will ever know. The words sliced through me. No one will ever know. It wasn't guilt I heard in his voice. It was relief. I couldn't hold back the sob that escaped me. It was soft, broken, but loud enough in the silence to betray me. His head snapped toward the door. His eyes narrowed, scanning the crack in the frame. I stumbled backward, my hand clamped over my mouth, praying he hadn't seen me. But it was too late. The fire crackled once more before he stomped it out with a heavy boot. The office chair screeched as he shoved it aside. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, echoing in the hall. Each one grew louder, closer, until the shadows shifted and his frame filled the doorway. The man who stood before me was both Daniel and not Daniel. His face was familiar, but his eyes were colder than I had ever seen. "Emily," he said softly, almost tenderly, but the softness didn't fool me anymore. It was a weapon, a disguise, a mask he had worn for years. My body pressed tighter against the wall, my voice stuck in my throat. He stepped closer, crouching down until his face was level with mine. His eyes searched mine, reading the fear, the betrayal, the 1,000 questions burning inside me. His lips curved into a smile, but it was empty, calculated. "We need to talk," he said. The words weren't a request. They were a command. And as the silence swallowed us, I realized that whatever conversation was about to happen, it wouldn't be about dinner, or work, or any of the small, safe things we had once shared. It would be about the truth he had tried to burn, the truth he had been hiding in shadows, the truth that might finally shatter everything. His words weren't a confession, they were a warning. For a long time, we just stared at each other in the dim hallway, the smell of smoke still lingering between us. His eyes bore into mine, searching, waiting, daring me to speak first. My chest rose and fell too fast, my body pressed against the wall like a trapped animal. When Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice was low, steady, and terrifying.
Skipped. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "It's not another woman. It's not an affair. It's bigger than that. It's dangerous, and you..." He jabbed a finger at me, his voice trembling now. "You're in the middle of it whether you know it or not. I blinked, stunned. My mind struggled to catch up. Dangerous? In the middle of what? I don't understand, I whispered. You're not supposed to, he said sharply, then softened. Not yet. The less you know, the safer you are, I almost laughed, though nothing about this moment was funny. Safer? How could ignorance possibly make me safe? How could the man I loved stand here telling me that the secrets I was choking on were meant to protect me? My voice cracked as I asked, safe from what? He hesitated, his jaw tightening, his eyes darting toward the office door as though the shadows might be listening. Finally, he leaned in closer, so close I could feel the warmth of his breath against my cheek. They're watching us, he whispered. The words sliced through me. My stomach dropped, my knees nearly buckled. Who? I can't say their names, he said quickly, urgently. It's not safe, but they're powerful. They have reach you can't imagine. After the accident, his voice faltered, his gaze shifting. After the accident, everything changed. They put your name on a list. They started watching you, watching us. My blood ran cold. The accident, I repeated, my voice hollow. He nodded slowly, his eyes heavy with something I couldn't read. Guilt? Fear? Both? You don't remember what really happened that night, Emily. You weren't supposed to, and that's my fault. I thought if I shielded you, if I controlled the narrative, you'd be spared. But the truth is, they were there. They caused it. They wanted to make sure you forgot. My hands flew to my mouth. My memories, the crash, the darkness, the fragments of voices, they all slammed into me at once. You're lying, I whispered. You have to be lying. Why would I lie about this? His voice cracked now, raw and desperate. Everything I've done, all the secrets, all the burning, the hiding, it's been to keep you alive. If they knew you were remembering, if they knew you were asking questions...
Know how it sounds. I know how this looks, but you have to trust me. I've been fighting them in the shadows for years, keeping them away from you. That man you saw me with, he's not a friend. He's a handler. He's the one making sure I don't slip. Making sure you don't find out too much too soon. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. Handler? Daniel, what have you gotten yourself into? What have you gotten me into? His eyes softened, his voice trembling. I didn't choose this. None of it. It started with you, that night. The accident wasn't random. It was orchestrated. They wanted leverage over me, and you were the way to get it. My head shook violently, my whole body trembling. No, you're trying to twist this. You're making yourself the hero when really you're the one I should fear. The words tore out of me before I could stop them, and they hit him like a slap. He flinched, his jaw tightening, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. For a moment, he looked like a man on the edge of collapse. Emily said, his voice low, broken. You have to believe me. I love you. I've only ever loved you. Everything I've done, the lies, the secrecy, it's all been for you. But love felt like a foreign word now, stripped of meaning. Love wasn't whispered warnings in the dark. Love wasn't folders with my face passed between strangers. Love wasn't watching my life burn in a wastebasket while telling me it was for my safety. I turned my face away, sobbing, my chest aching with every breath. He stepped closer, his hands trembling as they hovered just inches from my shoulders. I can't lose you, he whispered. Not to them, not to anyone. But you have to understand. If you leave me, if you walk away now, his breath hitched, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that chilled me to the bone. If you leave, you won't survive. I realized the truth wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. The words Daniel had whispered, if you leave, you won't survive, echoed inside me long after he said them. They weren't just a threat, though they sounded like one. They were something heavier, something desperate. A warning. I sat on the edge of our bed that night, the room dark except for the faint glow of the street.
Leverage for what, Daniel? What have you been hiding from me all these years? He looked away, running a hand over his face. Because before I met you, I wasn't just an accountant. That was the story I gave you. The truth is, I was working with them. Not by choice, but once you're in, you don't just walk away. I thought I had cut ties before we got married. I thought I was free." He paused, his voice breaking. "But no one ever really leaves. They wanted me back, and when I refused, they came for you." The room tilted around me. My chest heaved, my breath shallow. All the puzzle pieces scattered across my memory. The whispers, the second phone, the folder with my photo, the word accident, clicked into place in one sickening moment. I had never been collateral damage in a marriage. I had been a target. Daniel's eyes brimmed with something close to tears. "That's why I told you to act normal at dinner. That's why I couldn't let you see what was in that folder. It's why I've been burning everything that ties me to them. Because they're watching, Emily. They've always been watching. And if they think you know too much," his voice broke, "they'll take you away from me." My hands trembled in my lap, my nails digging into my skin. I wanted to scream, to rage, to collapse. But instead, I sat there in the silence, processing the weight of what he had revealed. My husband wasn't unfaithful in the way I had thought. He wasn't meeting another woman. He wasn't betraying me with stolen kisses or late-night hotel rooms. His betrayal was far deeper. He had lived a double life, hiding enemies and shadows and truths that had nearly cost me everything. And yet, beneath the terror, another feeling bloomed. Resolve. Because if my life had been stolen and rewritten by secrets, then I deserved to reclaim it. I rose from the bed, my legs shaking but steady enough to carry me. "You should have told me the truth," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "You should have trusted me." He stood too, desperation flickering in his eyes. "I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" My voice cracked as tears slid down my cheeks. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to doubt your own memory?"
The fear was something else. Fire. Determination. I was done being the woman in the dark. When I turned back to him, my voice was steady. "So tell me the whole truth. No more fragments, no more lies. What really happened the night of the accident?" He hesitated, his lips parting, his breath shallow. And then, finally, the dam broke. "They forced your car off the road," he said. "They wanted to scare me. But it went too far. You weren't supposed to hit as hard as you did. You weren't supposed to forget. When I saw you in that hospital bed, when the doctors said you couldn't remember, I made the choice to let it stay that way. I thought ignorance would keep you safe. I thought if you never knew, they would leave us alone." His voice faltered. But I was wrong. They never stopped. They've been circling ever since, and now it's only a matter of time. Silence pressed between us, thick and suffocating. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, my body trembling under the weight of everything I had just heard. And then, slowly, something inside me shifted. For weeks, I had been spiraling in suspicion, drowning in fear, clinging to fragments of truth like a woman lost at sea. But now, even with the terror, even with the betrayal, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Clarity. The truth wasn't about betrayal. It was about survival. I straightened, wiping the tears from my face, my voice firm. "Then survival starts with me knowing everything. You don't get to control the narrative anymore, Daniel. You don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. If they're coming for me, then I need to be ready. I won't be blindsided again." His eyes widened, his mouth opening to protest, but I held up my hand, silencing him. "No more lies. Not if you want me to stand by you." The weight of my words hung heavy in the room. For once, Daniel looked uncertain, like the ground had shifted under his feet instead of mine. I walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, faceless enemies watched, waiting. Somewhere out there, shadows moved with secrets I still didn't fully understand. But for the first time, I wasn't cowering from them. I was the woman who sat silently while her husband whispered, "Act normal." I was the woman who had seen the truth and chosen to face it. And as I looked at Daniel, my husband, my betrayer, my protector, my partner in a war I hadn't chosen, I asked myself the question that now haunted me, the question I knew others would one day have to ask too. What would you do if the person you loved most whispered a secret that changed everything. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to show your support. Share it with someone who loves a good twist, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next story that could change everything. Your engagement keeps these stories alive, so join the community and let's uncover the next secret together.